Great. We took our time to actually explain what how Python logically operates some operations, right? Based on something, some two things are equal, not equal, they are the same or not, right? We learned about the comparison operators, right? Yes. So we do that. So we saw that some cases Python says is true, some cases other cases Python says is false. Someone is false, and another one is true, and then Python is saying true and false on that. But then our interest is not to print the true or false of that. But then we just wanted to understand at that point how will Python behave, how will Python react to that. So that's what we call as Python can actually get us something, operate, read an expression and tell us whether it's true or not. That's basically logics, right? Okay. But then when something is true, in the case of the email and things that we use, when something is true, something to we should tell the Python script to do something, right? So when something is true, it needs to run a particular. But if it's not true, it should do another thing. So in addition to the condition that we learned, right, we need to actually tell the computer to actually do something afterwards. But before that, you see that I was saying when something is true. Another way of saying is if something is true. If something is true, then Python should do something, right? Okay. So if a particular condition is true, there should be some follow-up instructions. That's what introduced us to the if statement. So all the conditions that we learned in the previous session, right? That particular thing in a whole bracket on its own, we are not going to use print on it because we don't want to see the true or false. But then the whole condition, if it is true, then some conditions should be run. So basically, we are going to see the structure of the if statement. Okay, so let me put down two numbers before we continue with what we want to do. Um, yeah, I would say yes. My number one again. My number one is equal to 23. My number two is equal to 14. That's what came to my mind, right? So now I want to write a condition, and then in this condition, I'm going to say my number one is greater than my number two. Okay, so you and now will know that my number one is 23 and my number two is 14, right? Contains 14. So we need to do something after this. Okay, but then if we do the print, we are going to see true or false, right? True or false. Let's see if this is true. Let's see if this is false. That's what we did in previous session. Let's run this and see. So I'm coming here to run this. Then I have true. Let's say true. The Python says the condition is true, right? But then we don't want to see it. We want to do something afterwards, right? So that's one. Instead of writing print here, we just do if statement, right? You put if statement, and after you put the if statement at the end of the condition, you need to close um this. And now you're saying you are expecting an indentation, right? So let me just put something here. Print my number one. Okay, my number one. Okay, that's correct. That's correct now. Okay, so instead of doing the print to see the value, what we are basically doing is that we want to actually let Python do a particular condition and then see. Okay, in this operation, what are we saying? If my number one is greater than my number two, then we are printing a number. So I'll print my number one and I'll also print my number two. Print my number two, right? Yes. So you see that when I press the enter key, um, there is a space. It is following a particular line after the if. So you see the if starts exactly on the far end. But when after putting the semicolon at the end of the if statement and I go down, Python automatically gives a space, an indentation before I also whenever I press the enter key, it goes down like this in this manner, right? Okay. So let me just print another message behind this. So I will say if statement runs. Okay, so these are all the three that I have. I'm going to run this code and see what we'll have in our terminal. Okay, so you see what runs? 23 comes, 14 comes, and if statement runs come. So the if statement is coming from this one, right? That's the first number, which is 23. The second one, the second print is this one, and then the third print is this third one. That's what runs, right? Now let's understand what's going on. Let's understand what's going on. Um, the if statement, we replace the print with if statement. So this is an if statement. If, then into bracket the condition. For Python, this bracket is not compulsory. This bracket is not compulsory. But then in other programming language, you will need this bracket. So I'm just putting this bracket around the conditions to just make the difference for you to see that if, then the conditions follow. If, then the conditions follow. So what is Python doing at this point? At the beginning, if, then Python will check. This one is to check and see. When we run it first, we saw that it is true. Right? My number one is greater than number three. Number two, when that thing is true, then whatever is below this if statement will be run. So now Python will be able to enter. So if this particular condition is true, then it will run this, run this, run this. It will run everything below that if statement. I said everything, right? Below. How do you know that something is below an if statement? Um, Let me illustrate that with another example, right? You see that when I press the enter key, it's not going to the far end of the line. It is giving a space and following the same line as the above print. Okay, so now I'm going to go back. Like I'm deleting to just go back so that I will not follow that same line that I was following coming downward, right? Now I'll print outside. Let me if statement. So outside if statement is what I want to print after this one, but this one is not following the same block of line, the same starting at the same point as the previous print. So when I'm running this, let me run this and see. So we have it's here. So this second one, see that 23, 14 if statement runs and outside if statement runs, right? Now, so what's going on is that this particular if statement, all these three, these first three, they were able to run. These first three were able to run because the condition that we have here is true. But let me make it false. So to make it false, I'll say they are both equal. So that my number one equals to number two. That's what Python is checking. And you know that that's going to be false, right? Because 23 is not the same as 24. So that's going to run. And I'm going to run this again. Let me clear the terminal and run. So you see that only the if outside if statement is written. This third print is only the third print, the last print, which is not following the same line as the others. That is actually running, but the rest did not follow. So you see that you notice that when if statement is true, all these lines that have followed that particular indentation under that if statement, they are the ones that are running. So Python uses indentation to indicate that something belongs to a particular block of code, right? So you see the if statement, right? That's that the if statement is on that first line, and anything below it, if the thing belongs to that particular if statement that you have written, then you need to make sure that um you need to make sure that they follow indentation, the same indentation under that if statement. If you want to exit that if statement, then use the print. So I'm going to use another analogy, a simple analogy to do that. Is just the example of this flag that you are seeing. Yes, Ghana flag, right? Yes. So you see the handle. If you see the handle, that's like the if statement. The if statement is the first handle, right? You hold it. Anything that you see where the flag itself is, the flag itself, you see that it's not at the same starting at the same level as the handle. So the handle is there, just like the if statement in our code. Then anything that is where the actual flag, anything that's going to run under that code is the actual flag, right? So you see that the flag is actually having a space before you go to the end of the handle, then they follow up. If you want to exit that particular distance, you need to make sure that that particular thing is no more belonging to that handle, but then it goes outside. So if a particular statement belongs to a particular line of code, a particular condition, what happens is that you have to give in an indentation, and then all the indentations should be the same. And that's what if statements also do. If statement is one of those things that need something to run under it. So if something is true, right? a block of something to run under that particular if statement. It's one of them. You have functions. If you are creating functions, you'll be seeing these definitions, these indentations too as well. So when you are doing indentation, it's just like your idea should go to this Ghana flag. You have the handle, and anything that's below it, anything that's below that particular handle, right, should be the flag. But if you don't want to be inside that if statement again, or that particular handle or that particular flag again, you need to kill the indentation, telling that you are outside that particular if statement or that particular block of code. So you can, and the Python will now Python will now execute that separately if that is true or not. So what happened in our code over here was that the if statement was true in the first case. So Python was able to run this before coming to the last one. But then in this particular one, where I say equal to true, this particular condition is false. If the condition is false, Python will not run this thing. Python will only run if the condition is true. Will not, so Python will not run all these three. All these three are belong to the if statement. They belong to the if statement. How do we know that they belong to the if statement? It's because they all follow the same indentation and they are under the if statement. So they belong to that if statement, indicated by the if indentation. But if you go to the last one, it doesn't belong to it because it doesn't follow that indentation under those items, and as those items, right? It just goes back and starts its own fresh line. It just meaning that it's not belonging to that if statement. This is how the structure of an if statement looks like. If conditions, then lines of code and some instructions below it, they should all follow the same indentation, just like the Ghana flag. If you don't want to be in that indentation, right, you have to exit it. So you will do more of this and understand actual examples, right, to see how Python will do that. Basically, this is a simple structure of the if statement. Stay with us so that we do the next one to solidify the concept for you.